Hello and welcome to Voices of BlueScope, the podcast where we go behind the scenes at BlueScope to meet the people who create strength every day. I'm your host, Martin Feld. Thank you for joining us. In this episode, we're exploring environmental projects at New Zealand Steel. Our participant is Claire Jewell, Project Environment Manager, who kindly sat down with me in person for a one-on-one interview at the Glenbrook site in Aotearoa, New Zealand. As you're about to hear, Claire shared her story and her experience at the intersection of environmental and social sciences, while also elaborating on projects and community engagement at New Zealand Steel and how the company has become a kind of unexpected family business for her and her daughters. Let's shift to the conversation now. Thank you so much for joining the podcast, Claire. It's great to have you on.
Hi, Martin.
Now, kicking us off, just to start this conversation, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what your role is at New Zealand Steel?
Okay, well, more recently my role has changed, so I'm now Project Environment Manager for the New Zealand Pacific Island business. So I'm based here at Glenbrook in South Auckland. Prior to January this year, I was leading a small environment team for the same New Zealand Pacific Island. So that was involved about 4 of us generally, and we provided guidance to our business overall. The Glenbrook site, 190 hectare site, is generally which absorbed most of our time. And we also have an iron sand mine which feeds as raw material feed for Glenbrook, and then 2 small industrial sites up in Auckland City and a number of sites within the Pacific Islands. So most of our time was engaged in Glenbrook, and more recently over the last 5 years we've spent a considerable amount of time working with external consultants, technical experts in water quality and air quality to apply for new consents or permits for the Glenbrook site. So a lot of interesting work, quite diverse, and of course we needed to continue with the work that we were doing at the time. So my current role has taken a little slice of that role as environment manager, and we are focusing on, or the business is focusing on several large projects which are looking to the future of the business. So I have some input in terms of the environmental assessment, any permitting required, based on the long knowledge that I have of the site.
Now, with that long knowledge,
yes,
can you give us some background of when you started at New Zealand Steel? Why or how did you end up here?
Sure. So back in the late 1980s, I was finishing my undergraduate degree in geography, heading towards doing a postgraduate study in landscape architecture. So it was reasonably easy to get a job at the mill, and having a friend working in the marketing department, she said, hey, I'll set you up to talk to the human resources team. It was probably called personnel around about that time. So I think I seem to recall I had an interview on Thursday, Friday, and they said, well, can you start next week in a secretarial role supporting the project team? At that point, I could type, I knew how to read a contract, I knew how to format a letter, and so I provided a year's worth of support to an engineering project team as they were in the final stages of commissioning the plant as it's currently configured. And then after that, I left for a while, so I was a contractor at that time, and then I left for a while, still needed to finish my undergraduate degree. I think I had one paper to do at that time. I've been taking it, or been doing it in conjunction to get some work experience in plant nurseries and that sort of thing, given my path. So then I came back again to earn some more money to pay for my postgraduate degree, and after about a year an opportunity opened up with the process engineering team, who were then providing the environmental input and the process engineering input to the Glenbrook operations, and was really fortunate when the manager of that team thought that he could open up a graduate role for me, with the condition that I completed a Master's in Environmental Science. So that's how I came to be at New Zealand Steel, and I've been given so many opportunities since then. At that time, I was the only full-time person in the environment role. It had previously come from a half-time role run by an engineer. They felt my skills would be useful because I had a background in social sciences, having completed an undergraduate degree in human geography. And so then it wasn't for another 6 years that we employed another person to support me in that role, and then it was another 8 to 10 years after that we managed to get a third person, and then in the end a fourth person. So it's been a gradually expanding team just to try and keep up with all of the work.
Wow, so we'll get to that growing team and that focus on the environment here in a second. I'm really interested in what you just said about having that background in human geography, but then also needing to research and study environmental science.
Yes.
Can you tell me about the kind of crossover or nexus of those two things in your work, or how they sit in your mind? Because they do sound like they would complement each other here. How does that work? Yeah, they definitely complement them each other, and it's a bit like landscape architecture. So someone might say, well, why working on this particular site? How does it have a relationship to landscape architecture? Well, we've also got a 360 hectare farm operating around the industrial site. We have a landfill, one operating landfill and 2 closed landfills as well, and they have having potential ecological impact and visual impact on the community. There's aspects there where we're wanting to minimise the impact on our immediate neighbours and on the wider community. So in terms of a landscaping perspective, we've planted the boundaries, we've planted riparian margins in most of the streams on the farm land that surrounds the industrial site. And then coming back through to the industrial site, I mentioned that we have these major resource consents to apply for. So my social sciences background, human geography background, gives me, I suppose, a really good feel for the potential for impact on the community, a sensitivity towards the cultural aspects, the archaeological aspects of an operation on a site like this. So, it complements it really well. Part of the permitting process or the consent application process is that we need to identify interested or affected parties and then have conversations with them about what they perceive the issues are and how we might mitigate those within our operations. This is a great example, and I mean it, about how people can enter something like the steel or manufacturing industry with backgrounds or previous knowledge that doesn't seem to be the stereotypical fit of an operations person or an engineer. So when you brought all of this relevant knowledge in terms of the landscape, the people, environment and so on, did you still experience any kind of culture shock when you came into this industry, or was there anything that you had to adjust to, or was it just seamless?
No, I think it was relatively seamless. I not that I'd experienced industry before. I was brought up in a provincial town down on the East Coast. I spent a lot of time outdoors and on farming areas, but I was just in awe of the manufacturing plant. Loved walking through it. Really enjoyed listening to the engineers explain how the process worked, how the air pollution control equipment, the water treatment, and that sort of thing. I suppose part of the benefit of me not being an engineer and having been trained as an engineer, but I seem to be able to pick it up and absorb it quite well, is that I became the intermediary so that I could go and explain it to external parties, whether it's the council or the neighbours, the local community, or even to others that might work in services areas who never even really have a touch point in the manufacturing. So communication is a big part of the environmental role.
And you would work also closely with communications as well?
Yes. In terms of external communications, one of my earlier questions, which I relate this as a story, is like, so what do we do around the environment? And this was when I was still working for the project team, and I was handed about a page and a half of typed up text, and it explained that this is the industrial site, and we treat water, and we treat air, and we've got a lot of monitoring in place, and we're very sensitive to the community's needs and wishes and that sort of thing. And then from there, I was given this task. Well, how about we fill that out a whole lot more? We used to get questions almost weekly from secondary school students or uni students, and they'd ask a question, and I'm thinking, if I reply to that, I'm just going to do your assignment for you. So we wrote a whole series with an external publisher, wrote a whole series of fact sheets, part of which are still on our external website now, and that just helped explain all of the complexities around managing an industrial site like this, and then our mine site as well.
And you've mentioned through a lot of the things that you've explained to me, not only some of the projects that you've done,
yes,
you also said that the topic of the environment and also the team around that has grown here.
Yes.
What's that been like since that has expanded and that focus has increased?
The focus has increased from externally in terms of regulation. Our scope has increased somewhat as well. When we have to apply for resource consents, it's a very intense process. It's outside of your normal operations. The business has also, very recently, well, not very recently, but in my tenure, so the last 10, 15 years, there's been an accelerated focus on making further improvements and big step changes. And an example of that is we'd focused on diverting waste from landfill as much as possible, but through from about 2010 through to 2022, we've managed to substantially reduce the waste going to landfill by either recovering that material back into our process, finding an economic and a safe way of recovering that material. So we've reduced waste to landfill by about 20% in that time frame. So there's a substantial amount of effort, and some input from the environment team is useful and important in that process as well. There's been quite a focus on improving our water quality, reducing the amount of water that we use, and also a focus on reducing emissions and energy efficiency. So that's increased the scope, it's increased the focus from the manufacturing plant, and we can provide some support to those teams. Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, this is more of a New Zealand specific question,
yes,
maybe, and I'm interested to know what you think, because you have that expertise or that background knowledge in geography and the environment. Coming from Australia, I know that when you enter Australia through the airport, you've got your quarantine considerations.
Yes.
You've got the same thing in New Zealand, protecting biodiversity and landscape. For people who haven't visited New Zealand before and they might be wondering what's it like, can you give an idea of maybe what sets this environment apart, or what's special about the surrounds here or the industry that is embedded here? What would you tell people about New Zealand?
New Zealand as a whole, geographically it's very diverse. Right from the southern part of the South Island, which probably the imagery most people see with the Southern Alps and Mount Cook and the beautiful fjords, and that's quite a distinctive landscape. I'm told it's not too dissimilar perhaps to Scotland or even Switzerland and those sorts of places. Coming right through the central plateau in the Northern Island, a massive crater lake, Lake Taupo, quite distinctive volcanoes. A lot of coastline around New Zealand, so all of us, I think, are within 2 hours of the coastline. Doesn't matter where we live if we're in the centre of the island. And then coming right through here to Auckland, where we're on an isthmus, and we've got, not far, if you could stand up somewhere on a highish hill, you can virtually see both coastlines. So we're a subtropical area. We can be quite lush bush, and so good growing conditions and very green, which is probably quite distinctive from Australia, or many parts of Australia anyway. Yeah. And
whenever you've travelled, is there some particular aspect of New Zealand, human or natural, that you've missed or that you think sets this place apart?
Sets this place apart. Well, I suppose because it's home, I miss the people, and just I suppose the simplicity of the way we live. Yeah, I just the spaces I really enjoy. Glenbrook is not far from the Auckland CBD, but I more recently have been telling people that I've probably been into the CBD 3 times in the last 3 to 3.5 years, because it's just easier not to get caught in the traffic and get involved in the hubbub of Auckland City. I'd rather head south, much further south, and just spend some time out in rural areas or in the national parks.
And you mentioned this is your home,
yes.
So you have those feelings of home.
Yes.
What can you tell me about family or maybe involvement in industry? Or
over the last 13 months, I now have our 2 daughters working at New Zealand Steel. So they, I was obviously had them while I was working at New Zealand Steel. I had short periods of time where I was off on maternity leave, but it just never occurred to me while they were little or even going through high school that they would end up working here at New Zealand Steel. Our youngest daughter had the opportunity for work experience. She's quite academic, got to her final year of school, wasn't quite sure what she wanted to do. I was talking to the managers down in the Steel Serve, which manages our big equipment, moving the molten steel and the steel slabs and billet around the place. And they said, oh, hey, how about she come and have a week's work experience, see if she'd like to spend a few days with the fitters and a few days with the mechanics. So I lent her a pair of my overalls because she's not very big, and Steel Serve didn't have spare small overalls. And after the first 2 days, she came back to my office and she was smiling away. She'd spent a couple of days with the fitters and she was enjoying herself, even though she was a bit reticent about coming to work experience. Do I have to, Mum? I was like, yes, you have to. I've set this up now. They've opened up this opportunity. And then the third and fourth and fifth day, she'd come back to my office and she's got long blonde hair down to her waist. She's taller than me though. Being a younger generation, she had this pair of overalls on which you couldn't see the high vis anymore. She was black on the front and the back, grease in her hair, and she had this massive smile on her face. She said, this is what I want to do. And so this is coming from someone who I had just had no expectation that she would do that. But quietly, I shouldn't be surprised. She would do woodworking at home. She was always into trying to fix things, but she was also into sewing and fashion and making things. So so she joined the Steel Serve team in January 2022, and then about the middle of last year, our eldest daughter had seen an advertisement come up for assistant brand manager within our marketing team, and she had completed in 2021 an event management course. There was a lot of business papers in that. She had a particular interest in marketing, and after having spent a good 12 months working ridiculous hours in the hospitality industry, being responsible for, in some cases at events, 200-300 people, having her bar manager's license, so she had to be really responsible for those people. She really wanted to try for this opportunity, but she hadn't completed a marketing degree. Went through the interview process, and obviously the team could see some attributes in her and gave her the opportunity to move into that role, and she's now working towards completing her marketing degree while she's working with the Colour Steel team.
Wow, so did you ever see New Zealand Steel as a potential family business?
No. Not at all.
That's fantastic. So maybe more generations to come.
Oh, possibly. If we're, I mean, the Waiku, the local area, which is not far away from Glenbrook, there are multiple families who have had generations come through here, and you can travel through New Zealand, and sometimes people go, oh, where are you from? And typically, a lot of us in Auckland don't say we're from Auckland, because you'll get the, oh no, it's the Auckland people. So we go, I'm from Waiuku, and it's quite surprising the number of people who go, oh yeah, I know where that is, town of about 6,000 people on the west coast, overshadowed by the big city. And then people will often go, oh, I had, such and such worked, or my cousin worked there, or do you know, this is 1,100 people. No, I don't know them all here. So, it's not uncommon for this area, but it was not expected for our family because we hadn't been brought up in Waiuku. My husband and I moved here for me to get work opportunities in Auckland.
And look what it's brought.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. Well, I think this has been really good, and I think people listening to your story will take a lot, not just about what you've said about the environment, but also just the people in this area. So thank you very much for sharing your story, Claire. It's been great to chat.
Great. Thanks, Martin.
It was a pleasure to meet and speak with Claire. We appreciate that she gave her time, and we hope that you enjoyed her story and insights. For further information about what you just heard, make sure to view the links and show notes in your web browser or podcast app. To learn more about our ongoing global work in sustainability, make sure to visit our sustainability reporting suite at bluescope.com or subscribe to our updates on LinkedIn or at TV Bluescope on YouTube. Thank you for listening to the Voices of Bluescope podcast. It's always great to have you with us.